everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So, Mel Gibson's last 2 decades hasn't been that much to write home about, you know. Whatever you want to say about the man and his somewhat sketchy views on a number of issues, I will maintain the following. He's a great actor and an even better director, but most of the movies that he has done over the past 20 years hasn't been anything to write home about, as I said. And the same thing can be said for the movie that we're gonna take a look at today. But it could have been, with some tweaks here and there, an absolutely excellent movie. And the fact is that all of these movies that he has done over the past 2 decades, it hasn't been, you know, that great. He has always made them better with his presence because, as I said, he's really, really good. Let's find out what this movie is about, shall we? This is Bloodfather. So John Link is a reformed criminal and a recovering alcoholic, and no, the book that this movie is based on is not written by Stephen King, thank you very much. So he lives, you know, a lonely life in his trailer park somewhere in the Californian desert, where he also has his, you know, ink studio, and he tries to stay sober with the help of his sponsor, Kirby, played by William H. Macy. But there's one thing that weighs very heavily upon John. The fact is that his daughter has been missing for several years and he cannot find her, and he cannot really do anything about it since, you know, he has his parole officer breathing down his neck and what have you. But he doesn't know that his daughter isn't that far away, but she is in a heap of trouble, because in the beginning of the movie we see her go into this house together with a bunch of, you know, cartel members. She's also in a relationship with this mid-level cartel boss, sort of, and when he pressures her into, you know, shooting this woman to prove his devotion to her, she accidentally shoots him. Note to self: do not force your unviolent, coked up minor girlfriend to shoot somebody she doesn't want to shoot, because she might accidentally, you know, shoot you or something like that. But anyway, he gets a call from her from out of the blue where she explains that she needs money because she needs to, you know, hide somewhere until, you know, the heat, you know, cools down on her, because, as she says, I'm in a lot of trouble. But she doesn't, you know, explains a lot what has happened to her, and, you know, he takes her in, of course, but notice that she's addicted to, you know, drugs and alcohol, which is not very good to have around recovering alcoholic John Link, but he understands quickly that she is in a lot of trouble because, you know, the cartel members comes looking for her, and, you know, they're tracking her through her phone probably. And now they are on the run together with the cartel members breathing down their necks. Is John going to have to go back to his old life in order to be able to protect her? What does he have to sacrifice in order to keep her safe? Does he have to, you know, go back to his old motorcycle gang members, or, you know, former cellmates, and, you know, does he have to dig down deep to dig up this dark thing that, you know, he has inside of him that he doesn't want to let out in order to keep her safe? That's essentially what this movie is about. Now, I got very interested when this movie was, you know, talked about a couple of months before it's released. And, you know, I read somewhere, I cannot remember where, that they described this movie as a sort of art house combination of No Country for Old Men, Logan, and Taken. And obviously it was not going to fill up those 3 booths. That was going to be an impossible task. But I thought it might be a really good movie, and I also really, really like Mel Gibson, despite his many flaws. The thing is that this movie has one gigantic Achilles heel: 88 minutes of runtime. Now, on the one hand, you can say that it is good to have a movie that is just 88 minutes long, even though that's not essentially a bad thing. That can be a good thing. And I would say that that would be a true statement if they would have done this movie a little bit different. You see, more than 2/3 of this movie is essentially a setup thing for what happens in essentially the last, I don't know, 18, 20 minutes maybe. And The setup phase for this movie was very, very slow. We're talking, you know, a turtle with a broken leg slow, and not a lot of stuff happened. And I wouldn't hold it against you if you didn't have the patience to see this movie, you know, after this slow ass and kind of uninteresting start to the whole thing. But then we get into the final stretch of the movie, and that is where the movie really excels. There are bits and pieces of this movie that is absolutely excellent. It is not hurt in any way by the fact that this is not, you know, a big budget movie. They could have easily stuffed this with a lot of action and a lot of suspense if this movie would have been 88 minutes. Now, if they would have made the third act, or, you know, the second half of the third act of the movie half of the movie, and having the, you know, 1 hour setup thing being followed by the 1 hour of essentially what is the third act's second half, this movie could have been absolutely excellent. Or you could have done, as I said, a more action-packed and more impactful, action-filled and suspenseful movie. But now they kind of did the worst thing of two worlds. It moves too slow to be this great, impactful, fast-paced action movie, and it is too short to be a crime epic that it could have potentially become if, you know, they would have treated it as such. But now they are treating it as, you know, some place in the middle. So that's a problem. But as I said, the third act's second half is so great that you kind of forget the uninteresting thing that happens up until that point. Mel Gibson is really, really good in this movie as this, you know, gruff, bearded ex-con that, you know, harbors a lot of animosity and guilt and grief and bitterness. He is amazing in this movie. William H. Macy as Kirby is, you know, the classical William H. Macy character, but he doesn't have enough of screen time to really make a great impact in this movie. The rest of the cast is totally fine. This is not a case of who's who, it's who's that, essentially. So whether or not you will like this movie or not depends a little bit how much you can stomach your Mel Gibson. If you hate Mel Gibson and think he is a reprehensible human being, you will not like this movie either way. If you can look past the human Mel Gibson and just look at the performance of Mel Gibson, I think you can find a lot of good things to be had in this movie. But if you're expecting this to be a great action-packed thriller, you're going to be quite disappointed. There are, you know, shards of great stuff in this movie with that things going on. But if you're also looking for a, you know, modern Western type of a movie, sort of like No Country for Old Men or something like that, it's not gonna be there either. It is in the third act, and there are these bits and pieces and, you know, themes in this movie that is really good, and I like the atmosphere. So this is a movie that is very flawed, but I'm more positive than negative towards it because of how great this movie is in the end. So with that said, this is a movie that essentially has the right ingredients. They just haven't made a good enough stew with it. Erin Moriarty, who plays Lydia, is completely fine, and I think the chemistry between her and Mel Gibson is very good and very believable. And on the whole, I think this is a movie that I do recommend, but with a pretty big asterisk. This is not a movie that you will remember, that will not have any, you know, major impact on you, but it is a better movie than I expected it to be. You know, the first time I saw it, I was very disappointed, but that was maybe because I was expecting something in the vein of No Country for Old Men meets Taken or something like that, and I was obviously a bit disappointed. When I saw it the second time, knowing what I was going to get, I could appreciate the weird dark humor that this movie has, and I can appreciate some bits of it because I know that we're getting to the good parts eventually. But on the whole, this was an ineffectively told movie that has a great number of good things to it. So it's good, but it has problems. Bloodfather is a bit of a tricky movie to rate because it begins slow and uninteresting, and it's just at the end of this thing where it really starts cooking. I give Bloodfather 57 points. This is maybe the purest definition of a good but flawed direct-to-streaming action thriller I've ever seen. But Gibson's magnetic performance does pull this movie up a bit, doesn't it? So I'll see you next time from, well, so-and-so reviewing, well, such and such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.